Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session, Mindfulness Meditation for Health, Healing, and Stress Reduction, featuring Michelle DuVal. Michelle is the director of the Mindful Center, and she is a leading provider of mindfulness training across the Southwest United States. Michelle has brought mindfulness meditation training to clinical, counseling, and workplace environments, and her programs have been featured in numerous top organizations, such as Presbyterian Hospitals, UNM, Sandia Labs, Albuquerque Public Schools, the Department of Energy, and many more. The list goes on. Her clinically proven methods are steeped in evidence-based research, and she has taught thousands of people the skills of mindfulness meditation to help them cope with the high-level stress associated with major illnesses and the healing process. So please join me in welcoming Michelle.
Hi, everybody. I'll do my big Zoom wave. You know, everything's got to be just a little bit bigger on Zoom, right? But I think we're getting more used to being on these Zoom sessions. I hope that's the case for you. Thank you so much for joining me on this beautiful Sunday afternoon in New Mexico. Thank you for that introduction. And I've been teaching now for about 20 plus years. And my father was actually a mindfulness teacher before me, one of the first in the Southwest United States, definitely the first in New Mexico. And lo and behold, as life happens, what was it, last year, the beginning or the end of the preceding year, the beginning of last year, I also discovered that I was going to go on a cancer journey. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2019, the end of 2019. I had 3 surgeries at the beginning of 2020. 2020 was quite a year in a lot of different ways, right? And then I went through radiation, and since then have had a clean bill of health as far as that goes. But one of the blessings that came out of that experience is just a little bit clearer understanding of what the specific type of stress that we go through when our bodies are no longer cooperating, when we're facing some of those, sometimes bigger mortality issues that come along with any kind of a diagnosis, especially the cancer one, right? So I think that my own experience in using meditation, what I'm going to teach you here today, definitely helped me on my own experience with breast cancer. And that's really my main goal today, is to give you something in the relatively short amount of time that we have here together that could actually be of benefit, something that you can use, right, in the day-to-day, the nitty-gritty. I know on my own experience, those night times and middle of the night moments where suddenly all those big questions and those big uncertainties come to pass in our minds, we have to give our minds something else to do. Otherwise, the perseveration, the rumination just kind of goes a little hogwire in there. And then, as we can see very clearly in clinical evidence, when the mind starts to go off the deep end, right, which is totally natural and understandable when we have something big like cancer happening in our lives, the body follows. So body goes where mind shows. Body goes where mind shows. So the more kind of worried and fearful the mind gets, stressed, we tend to see it more expressly experienced within the body, that fight or flight stress response in the body. And then what we can know very clearly as well through clinical evidence is the more that we have our stress response triggered or activated in the body, the harder it is for the body to heal and recover. So not only is it important for the state of our mental health to be able to reduce some of our mental stress, that's hugely important, but it's also incredibly important for our physical health as well. Because again, the more stressed out we are in the mind, we're going to see more stress responses in the body, which then inhibits that healing and recovery response in the body. So that's primarily under the auspices under which I teach health, healing, and stress reduction. I primarily teach something called mindfulness-based stress reduction, which I'm going to give you a little taste of here today. And how I initially got into it was my father, just like all of us, going about his business, living his life, and then started to have some very real stomach issues where out of the blue, his stomach would seize up, cause him such horrible pain that, the first time it happened, he dialed 911, thought there was something major going on wrong in the body, and was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. They could find nothing physically causing his pain. He went back about his business, and about a year later, it happened again. And if you think about the type of pain that would cause you to dial 911, it ain't small potatoes, right? And the second time he goes to the ER in an ambulance, there are two things happening. There's not only the pain of the stomach seizure itself, but then there's also the fear, the worry. Oh my gosh, there really is something wrong here. They just couldn't find it last time. Over the next several hours, the pain subsided, reduced. They brought him in for more in-depth testing, but could never actually pinpoint the physical source of his just unbearable stomach pain. Over the years, it started to happen with increasing frequency, where when it was at its worst, my father was going into and out of the ER, the urgent care, just about every other month with absolutely debilitating stomach pain, until one of his doctors looked at his folder of his big fat folder of negative test results and said, "Have you ever tried meditation?" And this was kind of out of the blue for my father. This was like 30 some years ago. And the only experience he'd ever had with medical doctors was just, focusing on the physical sources of their problems, prescriptions, prescribing things to help reduce symptoms like that. But what this specific doctor was noticing, understanding that potentially my father's stomach issues were being caused by stress. When people hear that, people tend to think, oh, it's just in your mind. You just got to relax and chill out. But if it was that simple, we wouldn't be seeing this next bit of research, which is that 75 to 95% of all reasons that people go to visit their doctors are for stress-related causes and conditions. 75 to 95% of all reasons that people go to visit their doctors are for stress-related causes and conditions. So it's not something that's just in our heads that we need to just relax and chill out about. But what happens is the mind engages in stress. We have stress, mental stress, the stress of busy family lives and jobs and health and whatnot. And then it presents in actual real physiological reactions in the body. In my father's case, it was his stomach seizing up. So my father, listened to the doctor, started to study a little bit about meditation, and eventually went out to the University of Massachusetts Medical Center with a very specific doctor, Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. And he started to learn about this thing called mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is what I'm going to teach you about here today. And in essence, mindfulness-based stress reduction is about learning how to more skillfully use your own mind to be able to reduce your stress. That's in a nutshell what it is. Let me say that again. Being able to develop the skill or the capacity to use your own mind to be able to reduce your stress. My father, like almost everybody else, especially when we first start to have the experience of stress, believed that stress was something that happened to him, right? Like it was coming at him from his job or from his kids or from his family or from his health. But as we take a little bit of a closer look at where the stress is actually coming from, so much of the stress actually happens on the level of mind. So case in point could be something that almost all of us can probably relate to. I know that I really can, especially when I was going through cancer. Middle of the night, right? We're lying there in a relatively comfortable bed, climate controlled room, got all the nice external conditions. You wake up and you start thinking about what's going on in your health, what's going on in your life. And based on how you're using your mind, you will start to trigger the stress response, right? So it's not like anything is actively happening in that moment at 3:00 in the morning in your bedroom. It's happening on the level of mind. I'm thinking about, oh my God, what does this mean for my kids? Am I going to survive this? What's going to happen? What's the treatment going to look like? So based on all those thoughts that are surfacing in the mind, it's starting to trigger a whole cascade of very real changes in the body. This is because a thought cannot take place without a physiological response. Let me say that again. A thought cannot take place without a physiological response. This is important to understand because this is kind of how, on the level of mind, we create stress and a stress response in the body. So at any given time, you're having one of three basic kinds of thoughts. You're having positive or pleasant thoughts. You're having neutral thoughts, which actually makes up the vast majority of what's going on in the thinking mind in any given moment in time. And then the third type of thought is you're having negative or stressful or unpleasant thoughts. And each one of those types of thoughts creates indubitably a physiological response from the body. Let me show you what I mean. Let's take the first type of thought. Let's say my sister's coming to visit, and let's say I happen to love my sister, which I do. And I start thinking about her upcoming visit, how nice it'll be to see her. We can go out to dinner. Maybe she can watch my kids. She can babysit. That would be awesome. And the more I start to engage in these positive or pleasant thoughts, those thoughts start to create a cascade of changes in the body. I might start to smile. My eyes might light up. It might change the way that I'm breathing. It might change the way that my heart is beating. It might change the degree to which I'm holding my body with physical tension. All of this triggered by my mind engaging in positive or pleasant thoughts. Neutral thoughts tend to create more or less neutral physiological changes in the body. They can be as neutral as simply some neurons firing in the brain. But what we're interested in for stress reduction, which, by the way, everybody on the planet is interested to some degree in reducing their stress. In my world, stress is really just a modern day term for suffering. Because when we're feeling stress, why we call it stress is there's some degree of suffering that comes along with the experience. And there's nobody on the planet that isn't to some degree interested in reducing their daily experience of suffering, right? So that's what stress reduction is. So if we're interested in stress reduction, which we all are, to some degree, we have to begin to understand that when we engage in negative or unpleasant or stressful thoughts, those thoughts create a whole cascade of very real changes in the body, right? Our blood pressure can start to go up, our heart can start beating faster, we start to release adrenaline and cortisol all throughout the body, which is what gives you that kind of tense, overall anxious feel to things. And then what we can see through clinical evidence is that all of these responses, reactions of stress in the body, they begin to inhibit the healing response. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Turning on and activating our stress response actually takes a whole lot of energy. And because the stress response is primarily interested in your survival, right? That's why we activate it, because we feel like there's a threat to our survival. Which in this case, you're going through a cancer journey. I know there is one. There's a really big one. So that's going to take up a lot of your daily energy is how do we survive this, right? But if all of our energy is being consumed with that basic level of concern about survival, very little energy gets left over toward health and ability to heal, which also takes a tremendous amount of energy. So one of the things that was important to me during my experience with this, and hopefully it could be important to you, is how do I begin to reduce my stress so that some of that energy that is consumed by activation of the stress response on a daily basis, some of that energy can be conserved and utilized toward other processes, namely health and healing, and some ability to recover after our chemotherapy sessions or after the radiation sessions, or even just after a super stressful visit to the doctor. How do we retain some of that energy and more skillfully be able to use it toward health and healing, right? So there's a reason that we do this, that we tend to focus on a lot of negative thinking, and it's only exacerbated, obviously, when we have a certain type of diagnosis. But you should know that in your brain, every single one of us has what's called a negativity bias in the brain. Okay, it's a negativity bias. It's your brain's strong tendency to want to focus on some of the more negative aspects in our lives. And let me show you what this means and how it kind of lays out for us. So your brain's number one job is always the same. Your brain's number one job is to help you to survive. So if you think about it, if you were to go on a hike one day, let's say, and there was a path with a pear tree on it and a path with a snake on it, your brain would work extra hard to help you to remember the path with the snake on it, because that's the path that might actually kill you, right? You would never come home from that hike and someone said, hey, how was it out there? And you said, oh, there was this beautiful pear tree. It was so awesome and had all these blossoms. Oh yeah, and I saw a king cobra. You would never do it like that. You would lead with the king cobra. And part of that is the negativity bias of your brain. Your brain works extra hard to help you to remember the negative stuff and focus on the negative stuff, because it's the negative stuff in life that might actually get you. Another way to understand it is it's called the default mode of brain function. And this, I kind of love that term, because like when I see it happening in myself, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm defaulting. So what the default mode of brain function is, it's our brain's super strong tendency to, anytime that we're not engaged in a task. So for example, in the middle of the night, you're sleeping and then something wakes you up. So you're not engaged in any type of a task. Whenever you're not engaged in a task, your brain will slip into this thing called the default mode. And what the default mode is your brain's super strong tendency to want to flip through the Rolodex of either past experiences or potential future experiences with one goal in mind. And the goal is to find and locate and focus in on all of your problems. This is why even before we experience the cancer diagnosis, if you're woken up in the middle of the night, what's keeping you up at night isn't typically how wonderful your kids are and how great your job is going, how nice the weather has been lately. That's not typically what's keeping you up in the middle of the night, even though those things might absolutely be a part of your day-to-day life experience. But because you're not engaged in a task, the brain will want you to actually skim over the positive experiences, the pleasant experiences, so as to focus on the negative ones. Again, because it's the negative experiences that might actually negatively impact your ability to survive. And as always, your brain's number one job is to help you to survive. So that default mode of brain function, or that negativity bias, causes most human beings on a long enough timeline, right? So if you live long enough, at some point you'll start to notice that mind really starting to focus, especially in the middle of the night. Or for me, I notice it happening when I'm like sitting at a red light. So I don't have to be super engaged in the task of watching the lights, right? So my mental engagement softens. Or sometimes it's when I'm cooking. So I'm stirring the pasta. I don't have to be super engaged. My mental engagement will soften and I'll start to default, right? Which is start to focus in on a lot of our problems. And now so far we've learned that a thought can't take place without a physiological response. So the more that we have those thoughts of fear, of worry, of anxiety, of judgment, of over planning, whatever it is, every single one of those thoughts are creating a physiological change in the body. And then what most people try to do is they try to just like stop having negative thoughts. And people will even say that to us, just like, think positive, you got this. And we'll try to say positive, supportive stuff. But I know it doesn't, that can work for some of the smaller stuff, right? But it just doesn't seem to work on some of the bigger stuff. You can't just always put a positive spin and always look on the bright side, especially when it's something that could potentially be impacting your ability to survive. So that's where mindfulness can step in. And that's where these practices, some of the practices that I'm going to share with you here today, can absolutely and indubitably begin to have kind of a softening effect or a balancing effect on that overactive thinking mind that has such a tendency to focus on a lot of our negative problems, right? Especially when we're going through a diagnosis or a healing process. So the main thing that you should know about mindfulness and mindfulness meditation is that it is never about trying to not think about stuff. That is the biggest misconception that people have when I first start to teach them mindfulness and mindfulness meditation, is whenever they hear the word meditation, you're like, oh, okay, you're going to teach me how to like turn off my mind? And no, your thinking mind doesn't actually even have an off switch. Have you noticed that the moment that you wake up in the morning till the moment you fall asleep, if you're lucky, you fall asleep at night, your mind is thinking about stuff. And it doesn't really necessarily have what we would consider to be an off switch. We can just turn it off. Most people think that's what, excuse me, they're trying to do when they meditate, is just kind of turn off that thinking mind or stop thinking about stuff, stop having negative thoughts. But this is actually not correct. Meditation is not about trying to empty the mind or not have thoughts. It's actually about a way of learning how to work with and let go or release some of those thoughts that are surfacing in the mind, some of those thoughts that we're having when we don't want to be having them. So let's take a look at that just for a moment. I didn't say we're trying to stop having the thoughts or not try to think about the negative stuff, because that never actually works to bring us into states of greater rest and relaxation. In fact, you should also know this, anytime that you're fighting your present moment experience, or in other words, anytime you don't want what's happening to be happening, that will cause you stress. So we can look at it from this vantage point. Our working definition of stress could actually be the tension that arises between what is happening and what we want to be happening. So if you think about anything that stresses you out, it can always be distilled down into this simple equation: the tension that arises between what is happening and what we want to be happening. Anytime we're fighting or resisting or hating, not wanting this to be happening, that will cause us stress. And I know so much. I know firsthand when we get that diagnosis, that's honestly the place that we move into first. You just don't want it to be happening. Not now, not to you, or not to your loved one, not to your mother, or not to your daughter, or son, or father, or whoever it is. That mind gets kind of caught up there initially, and that's a natural kind of progression of when we receive a diagnosis. But if we stay there, then we stay kind of locked in stress. And there is a way to, even when we're going through a cancer journey, even when we're going through a cancer healing process, we can actually do things to reduce our stress. We can and probably should, so as to more skillfully help our body be able to reserve some of that energy for health and healing, right? But it ain't coming from trying to not have negative thoughts. That never ever works, because all you're doing, say negative thoughts are surfacing in the mind. When you're trying to not have them, what do you do? What are you doing? You're fighting against what's arising for you in the present. So what's arising for you in the present is negative thoughts, fearful thoughts. And you go, no, don't think about that. So now you're fighting your present moment experience. And that's our very definition of stress. And that's why we can so easily get caught in like the trap of stress or the loop of stress. So let me just go to the side a little bit, and then I'm going to share with you a few practices. Excuse me. I want to define mindfulness in a real clear way, and then I'll take you through a couple of mindfulness practices that are designed to help us not fight our thoughts, but work a little bit more skillfully with the natural functionality of our minds and of our brains to help us reduce our stress. So mindfulness can really be defined in 2 words. And those 2 words are simply intentional awareness. Intentional awareness. That's what mindfulness is, intentional awareness. So if I were to clap my hands and you heard that sound, that could be considered a form of unintentional awareness, meaning you didn't actually choose to be aware of that sound. I made you aware of it, right? But now first, let me take you through our first little mindfulness practice. I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to choose to become aware of the feeling of the weight of your body in your chair. So I just want you to notice the sensations in the body of like the pressure of the weight of your body in your chair. And now I want you to see if you can shift your awareness down and into your feet. I just want you to feel your feet just kind of resting on the floor or wherever they've ended up. Just feel your feet. And now I want you to shift your awareness to the feeling of your breath. So just feeling the sensations of your in-breath, feeling the sensations of your out-breath. Feeling your breath. Okay, you can go ahead and open your eyes. So that's mindfulness. It's choosing to put your mind on a present moment experience. So first we used the present moment experience of the feeling of the weight of your body in your chair. And then we moved our awareness to the present moment experience of our feet. And then we moved our awareness to the present moment experience of just breathing. Coolness of air on the in-breath or lifting of the chest on the in-breath, the release through the chest, the belly, the warmth on the out-breath, whatever it is. So here's the interesting piece of things and how it kind of all fits together is that there's a difference between thought and awareness. There's a difference between thought and awareness. So notice I didn't say, I want you to think about your breath, or I want you to think about your feet. No, what I invited you to try to do is become aware, intentionally aware, or mindful of the present moment feeling, the sensations of the breath, the weight of the body in the chair, the feet on the floor, or whatever it is. And now the interesting thing is that when you just did that, if you just did what I asked you to do, right? Feel your breath, your body, the feet on the floor. What you actually did was you moved your mind from thought into awareness. You moved your mind from thinking about stuff into the direct experience of just being alive, sitting here and breathing. Now, what we discover upon a little bit closer investigation is that most of our stress is actually coming from our thoughts of past and future. Let me say that again. Most of our stress is actually coming from our thoughts of past and future. I know one of the biggest things I would think about when I got my diagnosis is what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What is this going to look like? That was the biggest, most fearful thing, is that uncertainty of having this kind of a diagnosis. When I could practice this movement of mind back again into the present, even in the middle of the night, all that was actually happening was me just lying on my bed and breathing. That was all that was actually happening in the moment. But when I let my thoughts go wherever they wanted to do, that's when I got into a little bit of trouble. That's where the stress started to arise. Either I went back to the past. What did I do to give myself breast cancer? There's all those questions. Is it diet? Should I have been healthier? Is it my family? And then forward ahead into the future. What is this going to look like? Am I going to survive? What is the next 3 months, the next year, what is this going to look like? If I could practice just stabilizing my mind a little bit on the present moment experience of just lying there, say in the middle of the night, so much of my stress was actually reduced because it was coming from my thoughts of past and future, not actually the present moment experience. So this is really the essence of this thing called mindfulness-based stress reduction. 2 distillations of the points, which is there's a difference between thought and awareness. And when we move our mind into awareness, it's a movement of mind into the present moment feeling of the breath. The only ever time you can feel your breath is while you're breathing it, right? AKA in the present. You can't feel your breath yesterday. You can't feel your breath 5 minutes from now. So even just that simple invitation of feeling your breath turns out to be an invitation to move your mind into the present. Move your mind, in essence, out of thoughts of past and future and into this present moment experience where all we're actually doing is just sitting here and breathing. So let me take you through just a very simple breathing meditation that you can really do anytime, anywhere. You can do it for 5 seconds, you could do it for 5 minutes, you could do it for a half an hour, it doesn't really matter. A simple breathing meditation is when we practice, as I mentioned, that movement of mind out of thoughts of past and future and into just this present moment experience of breath. So just go ahead and closing your eyes. Getting yourself as comfortable as you can. And maybe to start with, just taking 1 or 2 deeper breaths. And really just seeing if you can be fully present, fully feel the sensation of deeper breaths. So really feeling those lungs expand and lift on that deeper in-breath. And then really being present, feeling those sensations of deeper out-breath. And just one more time. And then just letting your breath return to normal. Now, all I want you to do is just see if you can find a place in your body where you can most easily and vividly feel your breath. It might be at the nose or the back of the throat. It might be in the chest or the belly. Just wherever you can really easily just feel the breath moving through the body. I just want you to begin to gently ask your mind to just stay here with this feeling of breath. The mind won't necessarily want to just stay here. It'll want to go back to thinking about past and future. So whenever you see your breath, your mind kind of wander away from your breath, I want you just to gently bring the mind back again. Back to this feeling of breath just rising and falling through your body as you breathe. In essence, it's like just for this moment, it's letting go of everything else just for now. And just putting all of your attention, all of your awareness on this simple phenomenon of just sitting here and breathing, feeling your body breathe. Simply being present for the sensations of your in-breath, feeling the sensations of in-breath, and feeling sensations of out-breath. Sometimes we use the metaphor of just kind of riding the waves of your breath a little bit. If you're on like a boat in the ocean, the waves would pick you up and lower you back down. It's just like this with the breath. Just let the breath kind of lift you up on the in-breath, lower you back down on the out-breath. Just about 30 more seconds. Just give yourself a break. A break from everything you have to worry about. And just let yourself rest. And just let yourself sit here and breathe. So important. It's like the only thing that you have to do right now is just feel your breath. And then as the meditation comes to a close, I usually invite people just to do a little bit of movement. We've been sitting for a while. Just maybe moving and stretching a little bit, maybe reaching your arms up overhead or rolling your neck or rubbing your face or your hands or just whatever feels good. And then just opening your eyes whenever you're ready. So that's just a simple breathing meditation, right? That you can do anytime, anywhere. The more you practice with it, the simpler it gets to do, right? You have your breath with you in the doctor's office visit. You have your breath with you in radiation. You have your breath in the waiting room. You have your breath in the middle of the night, right? And so you just kind of practice shifting your attention from all of the thoughts of past and future. And you can think about it just like giving yourself these little opportunities, these little moments to just rest, to release your burden, release all the responsibility of all the things that we have to do, and just for a couple of moments, just letting yourself sit here and breathe. That's the invitation of the breathing meditation. And as I mentioned when we first started, you could do it for 30 seconds. You could feel 5 cycles of breath, like right before you go to bed at night. Sit on the edge of the bed and just feel your breath. You can do it while you're receiving treatment, you're waiting for treatment. You can do it before you eat your lunch, anytime, anywhere. You just want to kind of take it down a notch. That's kind of what we recommend doing, just going to that feeling of the breath, coming into that present moment experience of just breathing as a way to get your mind out of thoughts of past and future. So we just have about 2 more minutes left of the session. I want to see if there's any questions or comments anybody wants to ask, or anybody have anything?
Michelle, we do have one question from a participant. Can you suggest a book on practical mindfulness?
Yeah. Well, the beauty of having so much, research and mindfulness, really, I mean, mindfulness now like a mandatory course at Harvard Medical School. I mean, that's a big, closing of the chasm between medical approaches and this thing called meditation, this thing called mindfulness. So there's a lot of really good books out there. I usually, there's a great book called Full Catastrophe Living by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. I think that's a really, really good one. It's a little bit old at this time, but I just read it a couple of months ago, and it's people going through some physical issues, diagnosis, some illnesses, and then beginning to apply the practices right when their kind of stress is at its greatest. There's a book called Mindfulness for Beginners that's very good. There's lots out there, and it depends on, if you're more of a science person, if you like to understand like the neuroscience behind it. There's a great neuroscientist who talks about meditation. He's got some really good books. His name is Dr. Rick Hansen, and I recommend almost everything that he's written. So good. So those two, Dr. John Kabat-Zinn and Dr. Rick Hansen, both have some really good books on beginning level mindfulness. Yeah, good question. Anything else, or? We're there. All right. 3:15 on the noggin. Hey, I want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you for the invitation to be here. Having cancer is really hard. It sucks. I said that many times when I had it myself. It sucks. It's a hard thing to go through, a hard thing to have in the family. And just to kind of have some of these resources and tools, especially in relation to what we're doing in the mind, can be so, so helpful. Last little note, there's a lot of really great free guided meditations out there, and that can be a really nice thing to have on hand, just some guided meditations that you can listen to, kind of have that soothing voice in the middle of the night or whatever it is, really helpful. All right, thanks MJ, thanks Janet for having me.
And thank you very much, Michelle, for joining us on this Sunday afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. And we really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend with us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the invitation. I hope it was of benefit to everybody. I'll see you next time.